Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's 2024 R4 release webinar. Steve Tompkins, Principal Solutions Architect at Criterion. And we have some exciting changes to talk about today, and want to make you aware of these new changes. And so we're going to go ahead and get started here. We, of course, are recording, and we do have people in the Q&A and in the chat to answer questions if you do have something that comes up. If you have a question that we cannot answer during today's webinar, we will try to follow up with you with that answer and make sure that you understand whatever is happening. And of course, you can always reach out to us at help@criterionhcm.com if you do have some questions that come up after the webinar, or of course, once we go live with the new version. So first thing I want to talk about is our release plan. This is a little off. So the release date, February 3rd at night, is when we're going to be working on it. So it'll actually be available on February 4th, Tuesday, is our current plan for this. Of course, the webinar is today, so that's on there for that. And let's go ahead and get started and look at 24 R4. So let me switch around to my browser here, and you'll be able to see this. We'll talk about what we're going to cover today. As you can see, I'm trying to fit a lot into this this webinar here, so I'm going to go quickly, but hopefully we'll be able to get it all in and you'll get a taste for what we're doing here. So we're going to talk about some self-service enhancements here, adding sub-project and sub-task, to horizontal timesheet layouts, improved employee status management, and show active positions toggle. So let's talk about those first, and we'll show you where those happen. So the first thing that needs to be done, and these actually need to be set up, especially these two, in the system, in the administration. So I'm going to show where those are set up, and then you'll see how they work here in self-service. So I'll go ahead and go into HR here, and I'm going to go into my settings to show you where this would be configured. So the first one is the timesheet layout for the horizontal timesheet. We now have two additional options here. The default names are sub-project and sub-task. And you could turn those on and, of course, label them whatever you like. Of course, make them required. Are they going to be part of the expense report? Perhaps you don't use them in payroll, so you'll skip those. So these two options are now available. Of course, you still may have custom fields that you're using for those. That's not going to touch that. It would just, of course, move them over, but otherwise, those will be there. And as I mentioned, you may want to make them required. So you will need to turn those on and, of course, save to show that right there. And then what happens is in self-service on the horizontal timesheet, you'll be able to see those. I'll show you that in a moment. The other one is the status field for employees, and that's going to be set up here under employers. So if you go to your employer, you will see a setting here to enable that. Right here under the colors area, under self-service, where all the colors are, you'll see employee status. Previously, this was labeled as check-in, but we are now repurposing this to employee status because nobody was using check-in. It wasn't really designed the way that this is. So I'll show you this here in a moment. But this will need to be turned on for you to use this feature right here. So let's go back to self-service and we can see what this would look like here. So the first one I'm going to show you, because it's right here on the front, is this status right here. So the status for the employee, they can check in. This would be very useful, perhaps if you need to show that you're going to be out of the office, at a client or something like that. You want to let people know who can see you in self-service where you are there. So here you'll see some statuses. There is a code table here, so you can add other codes if you need to. If you want to put in a description about what you're doing, so going to the conference, something like that. And of course, you could put through a date if you wanted to turn off automatically and so show you're back in the office. Let's say I'll be gone through Wednesday or something. I could do that right there. And now you'll see where it says out of office right there. All right, so that's that status there. And then there is a view that your HR admins can see, as well as managers be able to see that information. So you can see that right there. All right. Now, the other one is the horizontal timesheets and those two new fields there. So let me show you on team timesheets where that would be located. Let me look at a horizontal timesheet. Shoot, I forgot to set up holidays. Let me do that. I apologize here. Let me go a little bit quickly and set up some holidays. Okay, I apologize for the slight delay there. Let me go ahead and do this here. You'll see the new fields, sub-project and subtask right there. So those, of course, are the new fields there. And when you add the entry here, you can select those things and fill that in so that people can record their time. Of course, this is the horizontal view, which is very useful. Let's say you have people who don't need to clock in and out, or they don't need to see the in and out time. They can use this and put down their hours per, let's say, project, sub-project, etc. Maybe they're doing a couple of hours on each one in the day for a total of 8 or something like that. They could do that. And one of the other things with the horizontal timesheet, of course, is you can copy prior rows, which will copy from the previous pay period to this pay period. And so if you already had several of these set up, they will be copied over from the last pay period. So those two new fields are available there if you need them on the horizontal timesheet. They're already there on the vertical. So it's nothing new if you're using vertical timesheets, it's there for horizontal. All right, and then the final thing here is show active positions only toggle in position history. This is very useful if you have employees who have several positions, primary and additional positions, and their history might be full of different things with a bunch of history going on. In here, we have a new toggle right here that will hide the things that have an end date. Perhaps, they've got 10 years of history here, and I want to hide it. I would just see the things that are currently active based on the start date and the end date there. So if maybe I had something future dated, it wouldn't show up. And of course, if it expired already, it wouldn't show up. But this toggle here, it's off by default, and you can just turn it on if you need to. And this is available here as well under their employment. Oops, not primary position, but position history. You'll see the same toggle here on the admin side. So if you want to see that here, could be very useful if somebody has a lot of position history to be able to see what is their current position or positions if they have multiple. All right, so we're going to go ahead and show a poll for this. There we go. So these self-service changes. Now, of course, these changes are not just in, we do have other changes you'll be able to see in self-service. These ones are mostly focused in self-service. Other things will be there as well. And all right, so thank you for that. So let's talk about some of these HR enhancements here. I'll talk about them just very briefly, and then we'll go into the details of them. So UI enhancements for employee search. I'll show you that in admin side. Additional termination wizard actions. A couple of things for forms. So grouping form items for easier layout adjustments and dynamic character limits for form fields. A new note field and workflow settings, bulk deletions of onboarding tasks and lists, mass deletions of documents and folders, and adding supervisor field to custom screens. So let's look at those right here. I'm going to do this in the admin side. So I'll go over there first to the UI enhancements to the employee search. And so currently in the current version of 24.3, there's a button here for advanced search. And then you can go in and you can search by a variety of fields to find specific employees, maybe by department or job title or other things. What we've done is simplified it with a icon up here or advanced filters that allows you to set those conditions. Or if you do have any saved, you can see here, I can see this saved one. And here's an example of a advanced search here. I'm saying their birth date is, greater than 1/1/1990, and their hire date is, I should say less than 1/1/1990, and their hire date is greater than 1/1/25. So you can see, or sorry, 2015, you can see how that would work there. And you can add other conditions. This is something that we added, I believe it was the last one, maybe 2 versions ago, where we added this. And so just to make it a little easier to find that, right here is that advanced filters button. So that's the new UI enhancement in the employee search here. Now, speaking on terminations, let me go to an employee here and terminate them. So we've added a couple new things here in terminations to make it a little easier to handle situations where maybe somebody has an outstanding performance review, they have goals, things like that, where instead of having to go and remove them manually before you terminate them, you could do it as part of the termination process here. So I'll go ahead and terminate this employee and show you what it would look like. She has a performance review and a goal. And so when I go to terminate them, So first off, we are exposing these fields. I'll show you where that is once she's terminated. Termination reason and the date. Let's just say it was today. Some notes. Reduce staffing in department. Okay. And you'll see this new thing is up here, reviews and goals. Now, of course, time offs is nothing new. This is always here to remove any time off plans that are currently active. If she had some benefits, that would show here. So this is dynamic. It's going to look and see what they have going on. And then here you'll notice I have some reviews that are outstanding. She hasn't completed it. She needs to complete this review here. So I can check this box off and go ahead and say, selecting it along with any added goals will be deleted. If I don't, it will be kept because perhaps some of it was done. Maybe the manager has done their part and you don't want to lose that information. You don't need to delete it. It's just an option there. And then I would hit submit there. Now, what we also have down here is the termination details right here. And this also goes into the primary position, or I should say the position history. So you can see that in there. When I go into here, it'll show that information in their position history. So that is the additional termination wizard actions that are now available. Let's look at a couple of changes in forms. And this is in the form designer here. I have an example form here. Don't need to worry about the context of the form here. It's a signature for policy acknowledgement. But what we can do now is you can group together several fields if you need to move them around. Now, of course, they do need to be unlocked for you to be able to do that. You'll notice here the signature, well, you can't see I'm clicking on it, but I'm clicking on it. I need to unlock it to be able to select that. And the same thing would happen with, let's say, if I needed the first name field here. But now I can select several fields, as you can see, and it draws a rectangle around the area those fields are located in. I didn't select the last name field, so it's not going to move that. But if I move it, it's going to move all three fields. So you can see how that's moving those multiple fields at once. So that'll make it much easier now if you need to perhaps line something up with a form and everything is off just a little bit, or you just need to move some fields around. You can multi-select fields and move them around. Of course, you still need to select the individual fields. It doesn't know if you want to take this label as an example, I would need to select that label in there. All right, so that is grouping form items together. Of course, it only works on the current page. I can't select like 2 pages worth of stuff and move it all around. It doesn't make sense to do that, but I can do it all in one page if I needed to. All right, the other thing is sometimes what happens is you might set up a field and you need to change it to a different type of field. So maybe you set up a text field and you realize that, you know what, I should have made this a memo field. We've had people using this form and I want to change this to a memo field. So right now, what happens is if you have data, and I say right now, with the current version, what happens is if you have data, you've used this form and you need to, continue using it, I can't delete the field because it'll tell me that it's already in use. All right, but if I want to change it now, I can go ahead and change it to a memo field. So this is not a great example because it's a number field, but I could change it to a memo field and, make it so that it's possibly dynamically, 3 lines instead of just 1. I'm able to make that change on the field itself. So that's now available for you to change form fields. All right, I'm not worried about my changes here. Let's also now look at what we have available under the workflows, and that's be able to put a note field on the workflow itself in case you would like to have some additional context about what this is doing. So any workflow you have set up, we now have this notes field available down here where you can provide additional context for what this is. So maybe you have one for different groups of employees and want to make sure that everybody understands what this particular one's about. You can now leave notes about that particular workflow. It's not going to show to the employee who's going through the workflow approval process or anything. This is a back-end feature. So you can basically describe that workflow to people who are using it without using a very long name. You're able to put that memo field there of the description. All right, so that's a new setting here in workflows. And I do want to pause for a second here and mention, without naming any names, that many of these features are coming from people like yourselves. So we have a customer feature request portal that people can go into. They can make suggestions on enhancements to the system. Of course, you can comment on existing enhancements requests out there. Let me show you where that's at. Right here in the help, in the administrative side, you'll see this new idea. This will take you to the customer feature request portal. This is the live one right now. And you'll see requests going back as very far as you can see out here for different things in the system here. Now, some of these you'll notice are completed. So this one we'll talk about in a few minutes here is printing printing employee addresses on labels. So we thank you for this suggestion here. We did create this thing in here. And here you'll notice I can click on one of these things and I can read what this person is asking for, add all the features and termination process to the leave of absence process. So if you think this is a good idea, you can vote this up. You can also leave your own comments on here and say, yes, this would be great. I always have a hard time when I'm doing my leave of absence or something like that. So you can leave some context here, or maybe some additional features, say, oh yes, and add a field that does this or something like that. And of course, if you have your own idea, you can hit new post here and you can describe what your idea is. You have something to do with the forms and whatever that is, you can go ahead, type in your title. And when you type in your details, when you start doing your title, we will show matching things, and you're certainly welcome to look at those just to see if perhaps we've talked about these and you just want to read what somebody else has said and maybe add your comments on that. So you will see some additional posts, and it's based off of what I typed. So if I were to type tax or something, it's going to show some things about taxes. All right, so once you put this in here and submit it, it'll then go into feature request. And as I mentioned, people are going to possibly support you and vote you up. And of course, those that have many votes, 3 or 5 or 10 or something, we're going to very seriously look at those. And if it's possible to add it into the system, we will look to add that in. Maybe not in the next release in a few months here, but down the road, might be 6 months or something like that. Of course, we may even reach out to you if we have some additional questions about what's going on. All right, so let's go back to our regularly scheduled webinar here. So bulk deletion of onboarding tasks and lists. So what this allows me to do here is if I go to an employee, and let's just select Marshall as an example here, and he has a bunch of onboarding things, I can now remove these. Let me just go and add some things to him. I can now remove multiple things if I need to from him. So let me bring up my information about this exactly. Is when I go out here, I can mass delete things. I can also go into the onboarding list and delete things that perhaps are not being used. Maybe I set up a list and I wanted to get rid of that list. I can get rid of the entire list if I need to. So I can go into my onboarding setup. And if you're not familiar with that is, you can go right here. And I can select multiple lists if I need to. Maybe I made a very similar list, but it's now my new one, and I want to make that the new list here. I can go ahead and delete a list if I need to, like that. Now it will tell me right here if it is being used on an employee. So failed to delete employee onboarding. Please remove employee onboarding document attachment references to this item. So if I go in here, you will see I'm asking for some things in here, uploading some documents. This has been added to at least one employee. So I need to go and remove that from that employee before I can delete this here. If I added something new in here, very quickly, let me just select something here. Now, because this is brand new, nobody has done this yet, I'll be able to delete it. And like this, I have a checkbox over here where I can delete this. So previously you had to go in and delete it manually, but now I can come in and, maybe I delete these two and I keep the course. It'll remove those in there. Now it is telling me I still have some things to do, so I can't remove that one, but you may notice that the course one is gone. So that allows you to go into one and delete, as well as to mass delete an entire list if you need to. So it will check the assignment of that. All right, so that is the bulk deletion of onboarding tasks and lists. Mass deleting of documents and folders is another thing that you can now do in the system here. So you may be aware of documents in here. And you'll notice here I can add a folder in here. I can also delete folders if I need to. So if I add this or I have a lot of documents in here, I can delete those. So you'll see here I have some older W-2s that are out here. Once I check the box on there, I can then delete it right here to delete this. And you'll notice here I can also download it. This will allow me to download more than one more than one document. This has been available for a little while, but some people don't notice that. So if I do need to download those, I can do that. And I can do it, across the board if I need to, and delete. All right. So as you see here, it'll permanently remove all associated files, folders, subfolders, and subfiles. Now, these are specific files, so I don't need to worry about the folders. But if I did, let's say, this folder called W2, it would delete this. Now, one thing to note is this folder might be used for all the employee W2s or tax forms if you're in Canada, perhaps is using the T4s. So it will delete it from the employees too. All right, that's that message. All associated files, folders, subfolders, and subfiles. So just be aware of that. If you just made this for a little bit of organization on the back end, that's okay. But some of these things you might be publishing to these folders, and you want to make sure that you don't delete all the employee records. So, just be careful, of course, as you do that. Maybe if you are in your sandbox environment, test it over there. Make sure everything is good before you mass delete those. All right, and then finally on custom screens, we now have the ability to add the supervisor field to custom screens. So if you're not familiar with custom screens, perhaps you don't have any configured, you can go out here and you can add various standard fields to the custom screen. So here you'll see these are actually two custom fields that I created, but there is the option over here to take standard fields and add them to a custom screen. And you'll see we have a large variety of standard fields that are out here. And now we have the manager field here. Is supervisor is just a terminology there. It's the org structure fields. Mine happens to be called manager. I don't think I have one called supervisor. So if I go down, I don't see it. But just to be clear, I called it manager in the notes, but it's the org structure fields. And so whatever you call it, you'll see that name. But now I can add that in there, calling it manager. Saving that, and of course, saving this. Now I go to this favorites here on an employee, I will see the manager. Now, of course, this relies on the person having a manager. He doesn't have one, so it says false. But if he did, it would show that information there. So that's how that's going to show the supervisor in the custom fields. Okay, so quite a few things in HR enhancements. I'll show this up here. We're going to go ahead and put a poll up right now at this time. All right, thank you for that. So what I want to show you right now is some new facial recognition in the Criterion timeout. Now, I'm hoping this will work in the webinar when I do it on my phone. What happens is we now have a new icon in our time app. It's not the mobile app, it's the new time app. Not new, it's been around for a little bit while, but it's a new icon where we'll do facial recognition for this. So let's see here. So this is the time clock kiosk app. I happen to be using an iPhone here, but you can, of course, use Android. You could be using a tablet. And this allows you to turn that device into a time clock. So, I can log in here using the employee number or the PIN if I want to, and put that information in there and sign into the system here. Now, of course, they can now clock in and out. If you're familiar with the clocks, you'll notice this looks like a clock, and I could clock in and out and stuff like that. Now, I may want to have facial recognition here where rather than doing a employee number and PIN, they push a button to have their face scanned, and it will do facial recognition and recognize them. So the first thing you need to do is go into your users. So you need to be somebody who is an administrator, and you go to the employee, and you'll see there's the button here that says update biometrics. Now, I'm on my phone, that's why it's a little bit skewed here. It's off the screen. If I turn it sideways, it would work fine. But when I hit this, it's now going to show me, as you can see, and I can take my picture right there. So you notice at the top it says successfully. So it saved that. I would go ahead and save. And now I can use my face to log in. You'll see a button down there at the bottom that allows me to do that, the little kind of orange face button. So when I hit this here, give it a couple of seconds, it'll recognize me, and then it'll actually clock me in. You notice I didn't put the employee number or a PIN. It takes me to the clock in screen, and then I can clock into whatever it is I'm doing. So it could be extremely useful to use a device like this without having to buy, additional hardware to do facial recognition. You can use your phone or a tablet if you have one. Of course, it needs to have a front-facing camera so that it can take the picture. If you have a very old one or one that doesn't have a camera, this isn't going to work. But if it does have one, it'll work. And as you saw, it worked very quickly. So it works great. If you need the kiosk app, then this should be great for you. So we're going to go ahead and put a poll up for that while I switch back to my browser here. All right, so thank you for that feedback for that. And we're going to go into some payroll items right here. And you'll see the very first one here is a bulk paycheck download that'll be available for employees to use. This is one of those self-service things. I guess I could have put it up here in self-service enhancements, but it's payroll related. So I'm going to put it right here. So bulk paycheck downloading is available in your pay history. Now I don't have one for this year. Let's see. I got some multiple checks for there we go. All right. So you'll see a checkbox over here that's now available for somebody to select one or more or all checks for the current year that they're in. So as soon as I check one of these boxes, and of course, if it was later in the year, I might have, dozens of these, depending on how far I am, but this will do all, or I can select individual ones, and I could choose this download button. It's the same thing as if I had hit this multiple times. So it'll give me a PDF for these two checks when I hit download. Oh, I apologize. I have a custom pay stub in there. If you have a custom pay stub, reach out to support, and we'll make sure we get that working for you. But that that will work there. I didn't realize that. I tested it in another environment. One didn't have that, but that is the bulk downloading of the pay stubs right there. So it's available in the pay history for the employees in self-service. All right, next up, we're going to talk about accurate mid-pay period adjustments here. So this allows you to accurately reflect changes to somebody's pay rate in the middle of the pay period here. So what happens is things like if you have a premium that takes effect in the middle of the pay period, what we want to do is make sure that it's not doing the average rate. It's going to or paid the same rate the entire period. It will now correctly use the rate starting with its date. So what we're talking about here is if you have a premium on this, and this is actually something we're going to talk about in our webinar in a couple of weeks here, which is shift rates. It will now accurately get that in there. I'm sorry, it's in payroll. You can now have rates in here with an effective date in here that is correct. So if it changes in the middle of the period, it will correctly affect that instead of going back and using the same rate for the entire period. All right, and let's talk about the next thing, which is life event-based benefit and deduction date adjustments. So this affects actually both HR and payroll. Somebody may have a life event that happens in the middle of the pay period. And we want to be able to correctly show that information and correctly deduct them based off of what's happening there if they have something change in the middle of the period. So when I do this here, you'll see if I do a life event, if you're not familiar with that, under benefits, course, you need to have some configuration in here, but you may have a life event. Somebody gets married, they have kids, but something like that. It changes in the middle of the period. We want to make sure we're holding the well, not necessarily the middle of the period, but middle of the year. We want to make sure we're reflecting that information on the excuse me, on the deduction as well as the benefit. So somebody has a life event, let's say they have some kids or something like that, effective on a particular date here, depending on whatever the event type is. Let's just say I'm trying to think here. Marriage I already have on there. It doesn't really matter. Let me just choose. I'm going to choose ineligible dependent. What I can do is, of course, add different codes out there. Adding the dependent if I need to can be done here, or I can select an existing dependent. So they perhaps have added this person already. And this is the date of the event there. Now, what will happen is when you go through enrollment, depending on how your open enrollment is configured, this may be the effective date. So maybe previously you had January 1st through December 31st for your benefits. We want to be able to reflect that from the 1st of January to maybe the end of January, it was one rate for your benefits. And then from February 1st forward, because that's the effective date of the life event, it's a new benefit and a new deduction. So we can properly reflect that, and it'll show that in the history there. So once this gets submitted and approved and the person goes through their life event enrollment, when they look at their benefits, the effective date would show 2/1 instead of saying that it was in effect for the entire year. So instead of saying like 1, ignore the year here, but 1/1 to 12/31, it would say 1/1 to 1/31, and then 2/1 to 12/31, assuming there were no other changes. And that may affect the deduction depending on the effective date of the deduction. Maybe the effective date is the same. The deduction would reflect 2/1, and of course the expiration date would show 12/31. But it will now show that correct history here as well as on the deduction, depending on how you have your benefit configured. And just to clarify that, if you do have benefits, one of the features that we added several years ago is a benefit effective date versus a deduction effective date. So it's possible that they are two different dates. You'll see here benefit dates and then deduction dates. Perhaps you'd start taking out your deductions 2 weeks before your benefits are effective. These may be different. And so this might be different when I get over to the deduction side. Depending on how my system is configured here, you may have different dates there, but they will now reflect that correctly on the benefit as well as the deduction based off of the life event and how you have the life event configured. All right, so while we're over here in the admin side, we'll talk about another feature that we added to the employee incomes screen. And what might happen is you may need to have a note on the income to maybe explain what is going on with that particular income, why it's on that employee. So when you select an income, you'll notice here it's here for every income. But when I select an income for them, whatever this is here, I can now leave a note about this particular income. This, of course, would be visible to the administrators to be able to see what this is all about. I might even say, Frederick is getting this display assembly for a certain amount effective January 1st or something. I could explain exactly what is happening with this note. So another payroll user or an HR user can leave that information there for others to see. All right, so that's the new note field available on employee incomes. All right, the next one is one that may impact you in payroll, and that is the tax expiration date in the tax engine. Now, I'm going to just put a huge caveat in here. If you have any questions on the tax engine, please reach out to support. Don't just come in here and do stuff, but you will see there's an expiration date in here. So if you need to have, maybe you have a tax in here that has been set up for some reason, you can now have an expiration date on here that'll be, respected depending on, the pay period and the pay date and stuff like that. We're going to look at that date, but we have an expiration date. Previously, we had an effective date and no expiration date. We kind of use that effective date to determine, if something changed, it would just start it on that new effective date, effectively expiring the other record. But now you can specifically have an expiration date out here, so you don't have to delete something. you can leave it in there, but have it expired. So again, before you touch this, make sure you're talking with support. Those folks who need this, you can reach out to support and, we'll help you with that. I'd say don't go into the tax engine unless you know exactly what you're doing in there. All right, but that new field is available here in the tax engine. All right, one last thing in payroll, but it's also slightly HR, is a 1095 form integration into Atrix e-filing. So you may be aware, in fact, we had a webinar yesterday about Affordable Care Act reporting. Of course, this is for the United States, and you may need to do Affordable Care Act reporting through the system. So, before you could generate the forms and everything right here on the screen and use our system to generate forms and to publish them and do the filing and stuff like that. But some people like to use Atrix. So Atrix is a tax filing service that does work with our payroll, and several of our clients are currently using that. It has an option to do ACA filing. So the first key thing is you do need to still generate the ACA information over here. And I would recommend double checking the data before you send it over to Atrix. So you might check the addresses and the demographics information and make sure that the things are going correctly into the box 14 and box 16 information. Everything we talked about yesterday, there's a video up on our YouTube channel talking about ACA reporting, and we're going to have another one in a couple of weeks if you do have any additional questions. I'm not going to go in depth here, but what's now available under payroll reporting, under government reporting, is going to be Atrix. Now, I'm not going to go into it just because there's still steps, and I don't have time to go through all of Atrix, but you now have the option in your government reporting to select a 1094, 1095. It will read that information that I just generated, and you can use Atrix to file. The nice thing about that is perhaps you already did your W-2s. Your employees are used to that. They like using Atrix, and this just kind of gives them a common interface to also see their ACA reporting. And Atrix is nice because they handle things like sending them out to the employees. Now you can publish them and you can print them in our system, but they handle mailing it. So it's an option out there to use. You're certainly not required to use that. So let's go ahead and we're going to show a poll for the changes in payroll. And again, thank you so much for all your great ideas. I know the Atrix one came as a CFR, so we appreciate that. Other ones did as well. I just want to point that out because it was the last one. So thank you again for all of your fantastic ideas on enhancements. All right, so we're going to talk about a couple of new reports options are out here. This one really is the report. This one we'll just talk about it. But the employee address report, my team address list report, is now formatted to print on address labels. And you may remember when I showed that feature request, somebody asked about that. So we now have this. It wasn't something, thank you, Ursa, if you're here, for this idea. But we did add this. You'll see that I believe we actually use this 5160 based off of this, and it's available in the system. So if you go out here to my employee team address list report, you can go out and do that. So if I go to my reports, my team address list, this will be formatted for a PDF. So I'm just going to do all here, or not a PDF, excuse me, formatted for address labels. Right, so I have an option here to do that. I forget where that is. Maybe it's, maybe Steve could answer me real quick. I know I remember hearing about this and I saw it, but I thought it was here that I could do that. But we do have that option. Is that an option out there to do that? Or if my team can answer that question for me real quick. I didn't look at this because I knew it worked. But this is available. As you saw, Ursa actually said, thank you for doing this. So we will provide more information on where that is located. Let me see if it's in the release notes so I can show you what that looks like. Let's see. Oh, okay. Now I get it right. It's not formatted for the labels. It's formatted so you can export it out and put it into the labels. That's what it was about. So you'll see here separate columns for all the fields. So if you do a mail merge, we've got employee name and number, title, address, and so forth. So if you export this out, it's very nicely formatted. You'll see here like the address and stuff, so that you can use Word to do this, because obviously there's many different address labels. So we've cleaned this up so you can do this rather than having it, going across like it was before. You notice how especially the address is formatted nicely to be able to show that. So that is that there. Now the other one is encryption for custom paycheck reports. So what we've done is we've added full encryption for custom paycheck reports delivered via email. So if you're not familiar with the document delivery, let me talk about that for a second. I like to point it out because it's a thing that some people like to use. In your document delivery here, you can set one up for paychecks. So under system configuration document delivery, I could come out here and I could choose to send by email the paycheck by employee report. So I might want to call this paychecks as an example, making sure this is active. This option here, because I'm sending it by email, would use their personal email address. If it is configured in the system, they've got one on their record, it'll use that instead of the primary email address. Of course, if they don't have the personal email address, it will default back to primary. But maybe they have a home email address they're going to use for that. It's the second email address on the demographic screen. But what we now do is when you are doing this here, you'll notice there's not a setting for it. What we've done is anytime you're doing this here, we will now encrypt that information so that if somebody were to get that email, maybe they had the wrong email address in there. We don't know that that's their email address. They entered it in, but maybe they misspelled something. They forgot to put a number on the end, whatever it is. You probably don't want that person who's getting into paycheck to be the wrong person, be able to see that information, or whatever the situation might be. We've now encrypted that PDF that goes out so that the employee should be the only one to be able to open that information out there. So that is available for you if you're using this to publish your paychecks. You can go ahead and do that right there. So the paycheck by employee report and encrypting it, that's now available out there. All right, so that's the couple of report options that are available out there. We'll go ahead and put a poll up for that, and then we'll move on to some great recruiting enhancements. I do see that some Q&A came through, and I want to thank you for asking those questions. And if you do have any additional questions, remember we do have the Q&A available out there. It's in Zoom. You can just hit the Q&A, ask a question, and then our team of experts will answer that question. And if we're not able to, of course, we'll follow up for you. All right, so let's look at recruiting here and some of the enhancements over here. Now, the first two, using our Chai artificial intelligence to do a couple more things in the system. So we did have resume processing before. It was using a little bit older technology. We've vastly improved this. It takes way less time to process resumes when you go ahead and add a resume to an employee's or a candidate's record out here. So let me show you how this works out here. I'm going to go over to this, and I'm going to add a resume to this person right here so you can see it. I don't believe he has a resume. So I happen to have a resume sitting around that I'm going to upload here into this person. All right, so here's the resume. Now, first off, you'll notice that name and everything, I got a whole bunch of information in this resume. Now, these, of course, who knows what people are going to do with their resume, but you'll see this button here, process with Chai. And so when I click this, do I want to process this? Yes. It will just take a few moments here, and then I'll get the results from this processing of my resume. So I will need to do this on a individual candidate basis. And here you see parsing check. So it took what, maybe 5 seconds at the most for a 3-page or a 2-page resume here. And now I can review everything that's out here. So the name, if there was a phone number, there's a mobile phone, email address, there's his address. And now I'm going to go down, you'll see other things out here. So there's his employment history, and you can see that right there. There's, NBC, New York Times, U.S. Army. Here's his education that's out there. Here's some skills that it determined was on there. I didn't have any competencies, awards, or certifications, but it does work with these. If I happen to have some on there, you can, add those in there too. And then I have this button to save the results. I will get this checkbox right here. This will replace the existing information with what is right here. So I will want to check that box off. And now that person, you'll notice their name changed and everything else is going to be in there. So the resume, now that button's gone because I've already parsed it. If they send you another one, you can parse that other one. So you can only parse the resume one time. So if somebody does say, oh, here's my updated resume, once you upload it, it will allow you to process that new one into the system here. So let's go through some of these things. You'll see the talent profile is filled in with the education and skills. Their employment history has 3 records reflecting that information out there. Their demographics, I had, their name and their social and stuff like that is updated. You'll see the address is updated on there. So it does a great job of processing that and then uploading it into the candidate's record. So if you were using the older version, you knew it had some limitations on there. First off, it took a long time. Now you'll see it just takes a few seconds and it grabs a lot more data. So does a great job of processing the resumes out there. All right, let's look at the other AI enhancement to using Chai, and that is in your onboarding. You may want to have a welcome email that goes out to your employees. So let me go to one where I don't have an onboarding email. You'll see here, generate email template with Chai. So I don't have an email template out there for this, and I want to create one. I could do that right there. In fact, I'm going to go to this one where I actually have it's on a pre-hire one. You'll see here, no welcome email. And I want to figure out what I want to say here. Click this button. I can write some additional context here. If you're familiar with using things like, I'm just going to say AIs that are out there. Sometimes providing more information gets you exactly what you want. You don't just tell me, write me an email. You need to tell the system what kind of email you want. So the same idea. This is providing additional context. So if I want to say, make the welcome to the company email in a professional tone and mention that we have 10 holidays per year. Okay, so you can put whatever you like. As you can see here, this is just text. It's very similar if you're familiar with something like ChatGPT. I'll use that one out there where you can type in, just kind of natural language about what you want, and then it returns the results for you. So same idea. In fact, if you've gone out to ChatGPT and you did something like this, it would generate an email and you could have copied and pasted it, but you'll see here generation in progress. All right, so here you can see the message that it did. Now it does do things like put in company name here rather than the token. So you could obviously type in your company name here. You can use the token like at employer name or at employee name. If I want to say, maybe I want to put their name there, hi, at employee name, and then use this. Of course, I can edit this if I need to, change some stuff or change the fonts or put enter stuff in here. I can do that. Here you'll see there's my thing about the 10 holidays per year. So it does use that context to put that in there. And, if I want to generate it again, maybe I don't like the message, I want to provide additional context, I'm able to do that right there. All right, so that is generating the email template. It's for the onboarding list, but of course we are expanding this to, other aspects of not only recruiting, but HR and stuff like that. So every version, you're going to see these types of enhancements out here. And if you do have some ideas, maybe you would like to see this incorporated somewhere else, please provide that information to us. We will evaluate that and add that to the roadmap. All right, so that's the AI-powered welcome email template. Let's move along here. Multiple custom email templates for candidates. So as you may be aware, you go into your notification layouts. There are a variety of things out here that you might want to send out to candidates and things like that for recruiting. And you'll see here, there's lots of different things you might want to send. You want to send them an invite for their interview. You can go in here, of course, and change this default message if you want to. But sometimes it's very useful to have custom ones out there. And so you'll see here that recruiting is now an option. And I can make my own custom one out here for employee email, for whatever it happens to be. So when you're making these custom ones, you come up with the name of it. You might want to attach, an attachment to it. Maybe there's a PDF you want to attach or something, the subject and the body of the email that is going to go out. So this will be available when you go to that candidate. So let me just do a sample email. Oops, let me put my email address in there. I don't know why I didn't see that. Okay, just hit verify. And the subject line, hello and hello world. All right, so very simple email address or email, you can see that, and I can save that out here. Of course, it does need to be active. Want to make sure that it is active so you can use it. If it's not active, you won't be able to do that. But now when I go to my candidates, and let's say I want to send something to John Plummer here, when I go down to his email, I now will have that candidate, that template available in here for me to use. There's my sample, and it's going to fill in all the things that I did, and who it's from, the name, and the message out there. So could be very useful. Of course, I could use any of those other templates. These are all the standard ones. And if I had changed those, that they would be there. But a lot of times the standard ones are great, but you want your own. And so you can definitely add as many as you like into there. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about here is one I can't really show you too much. In fact, the next two are a little bit more difficult to show you. But when people apply to positions, we are now going to save their progress across browser sessions. So what that means is if somebody applies to a position, now, of course, it means on our career site, we can't control what Indeed or other providers are out there. They may or may not do saving. I frankly don't know. But if they go to apply and maybe they get distracted and they walk away from their computer and come back later in the day or tomorrow or something like that, and they want to pick up where they left off, we will remember that information that they've entered in. So if they did this information and I walk away and I come back, it's going to remember what I've done here. There is a little bit of a caveat here. If they've attached something, that is a browser restriction that is out of our control. We cannot, save that because the browser doesn't allow us to save that. But the rest of the information we can save. So maybe they got this far and they had to go and help their kids do something, and then they came back several hours later. It will remember this information that they've already filled in, their phone number, and maybe things on this screen here and questions and so forth. And if they've started a form, same idea. Maybe they got halfway through the form and weren't able to complete the form. It's going to remember that information. As I mentioned, it's not going to be able to remember attachments at any stage here. That is a browser restriction that we cannot override. So if you have like an upload here to, send us a copy of a certification, maybe on your form, you ask them to provide some information. It does not remember that. And they'll have to re-upload that. So just know that out there. And, that'll be maybe the only frustrating thing for the candidate because everything else will be filled. So it'll be great for them to make it easier to remember who they are and stuff like that if they were not able to complete it. All right. Another thing here that is now available is some additional content tokens for pre-filled forms that you might have candidates filling out. So it doesn't just apply to candidates, but employee documents, applications, open enrollment forms, anything where you have like a document, you created a form out there. There's some additional fields available. Now, first name and last name, home phone and mobile phone were available for employee information, but now we've added it over to the candidate information. So that's where the change is. These were available on the employee things, but they're available now for the candidate. So if you have a form out there and you're asking for the candidate's name and their phone number, it's going to pre-fill that based off of the information that we already have. So that won't be necessary for them to enter that information in again on an application, or maybe you send them a form and you're asking for that information. They don't have to provide it to you again. So perhaps here, I send a form and I'm asking for the name and phone number and so forth, it would already pre-fill that. I don't know if I happen to have one, but let's just say this one right here had it. When I go to fill this out, it would fill in that information for the candidate. You might allow them to override it. That's up to you. You might say it's not read-only and they can override it, but you can now pre-fill that. So that is auto-filling candidate information in forms. Next up, some more changes to the question set. It's not a change per se, but an enhancement. You may have a question set out there and you like most of it, but you need to make some slight tweaks to it. You can now check one or more, and you'll notice this clone button is available. This will copy the question set. You'll see here, chance to copy it to another employer, which is great because that way, if you have them all set up in company one and you want to copy them all over to company two, you could do that. But if you want to keep it within the same company, or maybe you're only one employer and you don't need to worry about this, you could make a copy of this. I'll just leave the clone on there for now, but I could rename it if I want to. And now I come in here and call this D or whatever it is. You'll see here the questions are here, but now I can maybe add some questions or remove something like that into this particular question set. So very easy now to make new question sets. You don't have to start over every single time. You can copy an existing one and then make whatever changes you need to do to that. All right, finally, we've changed the look of this a little bit out here. We've added this ability to show or hide the closed E-Verify out here. So that way you can really clean this up. If you've been using our E-Verify portal out here, you know that it might get very busy with tens, if not hundreds or thousands of records out here. And if most of them are closed, it was kind of difficult. You had to scroll down perhaps to several pages to get to the ones that are not closed. So now you can hide those here. This is actually turned to false by default. And if you want to see those ones that are closed, you can go like that and see those ones that are closed. Now, if you're not familiar with the E-Verify, what this allows you to do, of course, this is something for the United States. You can, on your I-9, have a workflow that will start E-Verify for you. So there are settings that need to be done here. We did a learning series on this, I believe it was last year, but one of the settings in here you'll see in your recruiting settings is turn on E-Verify. And then you can also say the I-9 approver initiates it if you want it to happen automatically. There will be some settings in there for your username and password for E-Verify because it uses your account. And you'll fill that stuff in. If you have it when it's approved, it automatically initiates E-Verify. And if you're familiar with E-Verify, you've got the various statuses that might happen here. Perhaps you have to review their documentation or provide some additional scan or something like that. And so you can interact with them in here. And you'll see here, like I said, by default, this will be off. I turned it on, that's why I was showing it, but this will be off by default. So you can hide all those out there and it will make it very easy to find the ones that you need to worry about. This doesn't, if there's an issue, so if there is something and it's telling you need to check some documentation, doesn't hide those. Only the ones that are done. The completed ones are closed is their terminology. Okay, so one last poll before we are done here. We really hope you appreciate or you like all these new features out here, and please bring your ideas to us. We thrive on adding that new functionality into the system based off of your feedback. We have a lot of exciting new things already in the works for our next release, which 3 months from now it will be out there. Our team's already working hard on a number of great new features that are available. I wish I could tell you about them. But I know you'll be excited to see them when they're available. And of course, you'll be excited to see these new features when it's released next week. So thank you. Again, let me show you one last thing here on our slideshow. I do want to mention, we did do a webinar a couple weeks ago about our mobile app. But if you have not used our new mobile app, I would encourage you to go out there. You can use it with the existing mobile app. You can have them both on your phone here. But you see a QR code that'll take you either the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store to download the new mobile app. It's called Criterion HCM2. And it has a lot of great features. It's a very clean, very easy to use interface. I like it myself, and we know you'll love it. So feel free to download it. You can, like I said, you can use them simultaneously so that if you want to, there's something in the existing one that you need that maybe is for whatever reason you can't find in the new one, or is missing, then, maybe there's something out there you love the old one. You're certainly welcome to continue using it. We will sunset the older version, not anytime soon, but it will be eventually going away. So we do encourage you to download the new one and get used to that out there. All right, so just go and scan those QR codes. You could take a look at that, or just go to the store and search for Criterion HCM2. Now, one last thing I do mention, I meant the Criterion Learning Series a couple of times during this. If you've never attended these, or maybe you missed the one yesterday, that's okay. So I just want to put the schedule up for our upcoming next 4 that are out there. So I talked about shift rates during this webinar. We're going to go into detail on those in a couple of weeks here, Thursday the 13th. We're going to talk about shift rates. So if that is something you're interested in learning, maybe it's already set up and you're just kind of curious how it all works, or you just want to learn about it, you're certainly welcome to join us there. We'll talk about shift rates. We are going to do another session on Affordable Care Act reporting. So if you were not able to attend last week, or yesterday, I should say, you can join again. They're not due until actually the day after that, and depending on how you're doing it. So you will have time even after you do this to complete your ACA forms. And then you'll see our March schedule out there, overtime rules. Again, this is kind of like shift rates. You may, system's already set up. You want to understand how that works, or, you want to be the one who's in control of those things. We're going to talk about how those rules work and how they're configured, the different tokens and so forth. And ESS widgets and calendars at the end of March there. So as you are aware, of course, ESS has many widgets. You saw them in the webinar today. I didn't really talk about them, but we'll talk about those and how you can configure those, how you can configure calendars as well. So a nice schedule of upcoming events. And of course, we do have many more things planned out for the rest of the year. And we look forward to, to seeing you guys in these various webinars. As always, reach out to us at help@criterionhcm.com if you have any questions. And I do want to thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate your time. If you would like, we are going to be having a recording sent out. You can click on and revisit these things. And hopefully you all enjoy the new enhancements that'll be released next week. So thanks again for your time, and have a nice day.